Your microphone for now, that would help with our audio. Hi and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Thriving Communities Grant info session. We're really happy to have you here and excited to talk about the grants process. My name's Claire Healy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of the Partner Grants team. I'm also joined today by my co-facilitator, Emmanuel Morales, and fellow Partner Grants team members, Audra Christoffel and Nicole Calhoun, who will be here to support and keep an eye in the chat. We also want to know who's joining us out in community today, so please go ahead if you'd like and utilize the chat feature to introduce yourself, share your preferred pronouns, and what group you are representing here today. A few housekeeping matters. This info session is being recorded so that folks who aren't able to join can review later on. And our agenda for today includes a brief slide presentation followed by a Q&A with you all. We do ask that you please hold your questions until after the presentation, just so we can all have that basic level of understanding with the process. I want to start off by sharing a little bit of the why when it comes to granting at the food bank. We are, as an organization, working to address both people's immediate needs as well as addressing the root causes of hunger. And we recognize that in order to make an impact in those areas, it's essential that we work in collaboration with a strong network of partners with the work that you all do. And we are really committed to sharing those resources and supporting organizations, mutual aid groups, collectives, all together to work towards a healthy, hunger-free community together. So again, we're really thrilled to have you here. We welcome you in this space. We strive to create an application process that's really low barrier. It's been developed with the feedback of community and applicants. And so our hope is that whether this is your first grant you're applying for, or if you feel more familiar in the grant seeking space, that you feel really comfortable in the process. So that is a big reason we are here today. And I will begin sharing my screen in just a moment here and pass along the torch to Emmanuel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. And welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. With the first thing that we're going to be speaking about is the purpose of this grant, the Thriving Communities Grant. This grant is designed to help many types of groups, organizations, collectives, mutual aid groups, and other groups that are addressing various aspects of food security, community health, and social justice, and the root causes of hunger. And this, looks in different ways as far as the work that different organizations is doing. We know that, groups have a unique way of addressing food security and some of these other matters. So we'll be discussing a little bit further what that means and what that what's going to be considered and not considered. And if we can move to the next slide. As I was mentioning, all applications are considered as long as they are clear and defining the benefit and the plan that they have to support the community. Some of the projects include infrastructure, supplies, training, community organizing, educational projects, even some pilot projects for things that haven't been done maybe in our communities in the past, but we might have, good ideas on how to, start doing things differently, or evaluations of the efforts that are already happening in the community. Once again, as long as they're clear in the definition of how it's supporting the community and the plan to do so, it's something that's going to be considered. Some of the efforts that we're not funding, at least through this grant, is one-time expenses like food purchases, unless they are tied to capacity building or clearly defined, or that are clearly addressing a health disparity. And we can also give some examples for that. I think because of the nature of the work that the food bank does, it's often assumed that if an organization is purchasing and distributing food, that it'll be automatically considered for this grant, and that's not the case, because we want to really address some of the like deeper or longer or long-term impact, and that's really the purpose of this grant, as was being mentioned. Some of the exceptions for this specific rule of one-time expenses or food purchases would be like if there's an organization that is doing amazing work but wants to maybe increase the range or the capacity to provide help for more community members in the organization, or let's say that there is an organization that is once again doing great work in addressing some of these issues, but now wants to include also a social justice aspect and wants to train their members on how to address some of these or include more social justice view of the work that they do. Then there may be an opportunity for one-time food expenses for those kinds of trainings or that kind of capacity building. Another example would be if there is an organization wanting to provide or serving a Middle Eastern immigrants community and providing halal foods, because there is that distinction where they're addressing or they're providing food that is not usually available at other pantries, or foods that are meeting the needs of a specific community, or cultural or religious needs, then there is an opportunity for that to be funded through this grant. And the next slide. As far as eligibility, as long as the project or organization is happening within the following counties, which are Cochise, Graham, Greeley, Pima, and Santa Cruz counties. As long as you're operating within those counties, you're eligible. You are, well, there are, I guess, 3 tiers also of the kinds of organizations that we're supporting. One of them are the more traditional, I guess, philanthropic 501c3s or nonprofits, churches, schools, mutual aid collectives, or travel organizations. And the second tier, the Tier B, would be organizations that are mutual aid groups, collectives, or travel organizations that are fiscally sponsored by a 501c3, meaning that they're not themselves a 501c3, but are being fiscally sponsored by one. So that would be another group of organizations that would be supporting. And the third tier would be organizations that are doing that community work, but don't necessarily have a 501c3 status or a fiscal sponsor to support them. There is a limited capacity for the food bank to support those organizations still through Avanzando, which is an LLC that the food bank has created in order to act as a fiscal sponsor. We cannot guarantee that this fiscal sponsorship will be available or provided, and we will be evaluating them on a one-by-one cases depending on the group's needs and the barriers to funding. So if these are organizations that haven't received funding in the past or have some barriers to accessing funding, then that'll be considered in the decision. Thank you. Some of the categories of consideration when we're reviewing applications are some of the following. The applications that clearly describe the issue and intended impact of the project is one of those categories. Making sure that the intended beneficiaries of the project are being involved in some of these projects or are centering the needs and the participation of these members of the community is also another aspect of the considerations that we'll be going over when we review applications. benefiting organizations that strengthen the network of partnerships in Southern Arizona. So organizations that are supporting or benefiting, like we're going to be asking ourselves, does this project strengthen the network of partners that we already have in the community, the work that other organizations are already doing? Does this stack functions in helping with different needs that we have in the community? Then those all are going to be, once again, considered higher in priority when it comes to the review application process. Something that I did, well, I guess I can mention at the end. We're also considering organizations that advance a thriving, equitable community. Examples could include some of the following: organizations that advance racial and or health equity, projects that increase organizational capacity and justice work, projects that increase social cohesion and social connection. Some of these, organizations breaking isolation and bringing people together, or increasing access to healthy, culturally appropriate food, as well as increasing economic opportunities. So one of the things that is important for us to highlight that I didn't highlight in the previous slide, or actually it wasn't in the previous slide, sorry, but it was for this one. It's important for us to make it clear that it's not that applications are not being evaluated on the writing style or the tone of the grant application. We want to make sure that people feel comfortable applying, even if you haven't applied for a grant before, and making sure that you don't need a professional grant writer in order to apply for this grant. So we love to see applications from people that have applying for the first time to a grant, or so this is a great place for those kinds of organizations to start, because that is part of the reason that we're doing this, and though we've designed the grant process to be this way. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on back to Claire.
Thanks, Emmanuel. So we just went over the elements of a strong application, and to add to that, to give an understanding of the diversity and the range of projects addressing needs across the service area, we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some of the categories of projects that we funded in the past. So a big one we look at is organizational capacity building. For example, really important staff trainings, maybe things like diversity, equity, and inclusion training among staff. Things like an organization, maybe a pantry switching to a client choice model, or a group doing a community needs assessment that will inform the provision of future services. We also see a lot of food systems development projects, particularly in the rural areas where more farming is happening, although we have some really cool urban farming projects as well. But examples of food system development projects can include cooperative farm space, where farmers of all ages and sort of experience levels are coming together to share land, resources, knowledge. Maybe the project is an expansion of community supported agriculture, or CSA, as well as an incubation of a partnership between local farmers and local schools to get more of that produce into the cafeteria and pair that with nutrition education. We also support health resource and outreach projects. Examples of this include community health worker programs, in which folks are met where they are, or community health workers are, say, present at a food pantry to connect folks to things like basic medical screening, follow-up appointments, nutrition education, and so on, in in addition to other resources, like perhaps pairing them with government resources that are available to them. We also have seen projects that include a mobile health unit, which can also be going out into community to do screenings and reaching more folks, because again, they're going to where the people are rather than having folks come and make those appointments and so on. Just sort of lowers those barriers when the resource shows up in the community. We also see projects that focus on community and neighborhood development. Some great examples of this are restoration projects, neighborhood cleanups, plantings, creation of green space, as well as a lot of really beautiful community gardens and school gardens. We see projects that have an environmental stewardship focus, such as retrofitting of appliances to be more green, rainwater harvesting, solar panels, composting, you name it, as well as cultural preservation and food sovereignty projects. In the past, these have looked like seed saving or production of native foods, education around the health and benefits of those native foods. Additionally, there was a project that used a land trust model to purchase and restore a house in a historic neighborhood that has become a community hub for celebration, sort of a cultural history museum for this neighborhood that has a really rich history within the Mexican and Tohono O'odham community, also paired with a community garden, which in itself serves as a really great community gathering space. Another example of project type is local economic development. We've seen projects such as interest-free loans and entrepreneurial sort of micro development, mentorship workshops, particularly for specialized groups like, say, single moms. And then lastly, we see projects that involve upgrades to necessary infrastructure to maintain or grow community services. So an example of this would be a food pantry where the refrigeration totally goes out, and without replacement of that necessary infrastructure, they are not able to supply perishable items to their community. So that's sort of a beautiful span of different projects, and hopefully gives you an idea of the inclusion of what is involved in this grant process and all of the things that we are looking for and have supported in the past. If you're interested in reading about each one in more detail and seeing the full list, you can find that on our website. Off of the food bank's main website, it's under the How We Help tab and then grant and loan opportunities. And that part of our website is actually a great spot to go for multiple things. It's where this recording will be posted. We have an example application. We have a list of frequently asked questions, and so on. And of course, you can also always reach out to us, and there is a method for that on the website as well. And in terms of funding amounts and timeline, we are anticipating granting about $1.2 million for this funding round 2024. And we have 2 maximum amounts that applicants can request. If you are applying as a single group or organization, you can ask for up to $20,000. And if you are a group of 2 or more distinct organizations applying with a collaborative proposal, you can request up to $60,000. Our grant round is opening for applications next week. So you will be able to access the live website and submit your application starting at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, October 11th through 6 p.m. Wednesday, December 13th of this year. One important ask that we have is to please continue monitoring your email even after you submit, because we do have a process that comes later of just making sure we have all the information needed in an application. So there is a chance that we may reach back out to you with a request to complete the application. So check that periodically. And then fast forwarding in the process, we have our evaluation of the applications, and then we communicate the decisions to all applicants. That will happen by March 13th of next year. And then for those who are awarded funding, they should expect to receive their check by the end of April of next year. So with that, we want to turn it back to you all. We're, again, really excited to have you here and eager to hear your questions. If you ever need to get a hold of us, partnergrants@communityfoodbank.org is our email. And now I will turn it back to the group for questions. Hallie, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was wondering, if funding is awarded, what is the time frame for those funds to be used?
Yes, that's a great question. So the idea is that once the funding is awarded, the projects will span a year. And then in terms of reporting, we ask that you submit and we assign the follow-up report for 13 months out. So again, a year for the project, and then we like to give that month, just knowing that we're all very busy, it's nice to have some time to reflect on the process.
Thank you.
Let's see, Penny, looks like your hand's raised if you want to turn your mic on.
Hi, this is Penny from Sister Jose's, and we were fortunate enough to receive some funding last year from you, and I was wondering if I need to present a new project or if the same project would be eligible since it's an ongoing equity project.
Yeah, another great question. We would certainly love to hear in your application about what has been built in this past half year or so since you got funding, as well as if there are like new things that you want to try out. But I think you, of course, know the project best. So if it is a proposal to carry over this project from the last round, I would definitely encourage you to share what the impact has been so far and what the impact would be to continue that over, as well as if it feels right within the capacity and within all of you folks working on the project itself, if you want to say, we're using elements from this original project and we're wanting to add in X, Y, and Z, or maybe just X, one more element, any of that is totally fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, your volume's kind of low, Emmanuel.
Sorry, I was just saying that there's a question in the chat that is along the similar lines. Is there a limit on how many times an org can apply and be awarded? This is by Yoli Contreras.
Yes, so we have found over several years of granting now, and especially an increased need are over the past few years, the amount of applications we get has doubled reliably every year. So we are starting to look at our process of eligibility, thinking about how do we equitably leave space for new projects, even engaging folks in more rural areas. And so we are beginning to put some parameters on timeline for funding certain projects. For this grant round, anyone that affects has already had one-on-one communication. So if you haven't heard from us, then certainly if you have received funding in the past, that project is still eligible. But yeah, important to note, I think, that because we want to make sure there's space for everybody, we are asking certain projects to take a break from funding, at least from being a main applicant in the process. They would be able to be joining as a collaborator on someone else's application. But again, I don't think it applies to any of the audience here. So yes, Yasmin, you're good to go applying this year.
There's one more question in the chat about where do you get an access code from? And I think if you click on the apply here link before the application actually opens, it will ask you for an access code because it's not public yet, it's not live. But once it's live on the 11th, you won't need the access code anymore.
Other questions?
I don't know if you can see it, Claire. Callie has a question.
Yes, in regard to capacity building, is something to fund it like an expansion of hours with a new employee, like somebody else to come in and fill up those hours, or a new employee to launch a new program? Is that something to be considered?
That is something that we could consider and have in the past. We've supported, particularly if that position is needed, as you're saying, to expand a new program, a new span of services. That would definitely be in the scope of this grant. We recognize that you can't do so much of the work without the people, and it's important that folks are compensated for their work.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, Penny, is your hand still raised from before, or do you have another question?
No, that's from before.
Any other questions, thoughts? How are people feeling about going into the process?
So this is my first year with Greater Vail Community Resources, and going through this. I was on the tail end of the process last year. And I think I learned even from being part of that just last few months and doing the the um, those final few months. And I think I'm grateful for the opportunity to apply again. I feel pretty comfortable with the application process. I think you guys have done a really good job at making sure that you're available to us to help us through it. So just thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much for the kind feedback. Glad it's feeling comfortable and that you'll get to be a part of the full process this year. Nice. Yasmin, did you have another question? Let's see. I don't know if you're talking and you're still on mute, but feel free when you're available. If you have another question, anybody can just turn their mic on and hop on.
I have a question about partnerships. If we were to partner with a nonprofit organization, is that something to be considered? For instance, the property that we are on is the local school district property. And so if we were to do like a community garden with them or something like that, is that if one of us is a nonprofit and one is not, is that okay?
Yes, yeah, but we try to be really inclusive with the groups that are eligible. In fact, schools themselves are eligible and could be a main applicant. So it sounds like it's that partnership you're talking about. If even if you are considering partnering with in a for-profit business, there have been cases in which folks have applied that way. A for-profit business cannot be the main applicant, but they can be a collaborator on a project. We ask, of course, that the project itself is for community benefit. It certainly wouldn't be appropriate for a grant to be just bringing in revenue for a for-profit business. But there have been cases, particularly in building like local food systems where there is a local food distributor, for example, that is collaborating with farmers. But certainly we see a lot of collaborative projects like you're talking about with a nonprofit in a school, for example. And it's really a great overlap when folks can come together to create a shared community space like that. Yeah, great question. See, got some stuff in the chat. Any other questions that are coming up for folks?
I was just gonna hop in and share. Sorry for y'all whose audio isn't working. Thanks for putting that information in the chat. And that goes for anyone. You can ask questions in the chat. And I've heard from a couple of you who said you've applied and didn't get awarded last year. So just want to encourage folks, like Claire has mentioned, we have a lot of interest. And so, we can't fund every project or every group that's applying. So please don't be discouraged. And I just want to kind of highlight, if you have a chance after this to go back to the slide that shows like a strong application will, that's really the best information we can share about how to provide like a really strong project, is if you really look at those things and make sure that those items are included in your proposal and your project. That's the best way to have a really competitive application. Those are essentially like key pieces of our evaluation criteria that we give
Mhm.
y'all in advance. So those are some really guiding pieces that you can think about if you have applied before, just how you might tweak or, provide additional information that kind of gets to the heart of those pieces.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true what Audra says, emphasizing the amount of requests we get. I mentioned we see more than double actually the amount of applications that we were getting a few years ago. If, and it all depends how many applications we're able to fund, because folks are asking for different amounts. So really, if we're lucky, we're able to fund a little under half of applications most years. So it goes without saying that the evaluation team has really hard decisions to make. Yeah, it can be quite competitive when you're looking at that number of applications. But like Audra said, don't be discouraged. Glad you're here. And, if you feel like there's something you want to talk about one-on-one, get some feedback on a past application, that's something that can be set up as well. I'm good at waiting in silence for questions. Anything else coming up for folks?
Hi, this is Penny again. I'd love
Hi,
for you to go
Penny.
over a little bit more about organizational capacity, because we've been in such a state of expansion and growth. We have lots of different needs, like, creating our strategic plan to reflect the changes, DEI you mentioned, adding on new staff, all of those things. So I was just wondering where the grant committee's passions are aligning these days, where that kind of, 'cause that's not always the most exciting projects, as some of them that you talk about, but it's such necessary work. So could you just give us some more information about that?
Yeah, certainly. I think we all understand the importance of that foundation building work. It really speaks to that root cause focus that the grants have. And so we would be excited to see any number of those proposals. And truly, we as like an evaluation group trust that the applicant is bringing forth their greatest need, Penny. So I think whatever feels the most pressing to you, any number of those capacity building efforts sounds really important, impactful, and it would certainly be considered. So I think again, what we're looking for is really that, the what, the why, the impact of that request, and how that's building internal strength for your shelter, as well as helping out community members. So I want to encourage you and validate that those really, you gave the great examples of capacity building efforts. Any one of those, or even a combination, would be welcomed.
Thank you very much.
I will just add to that, Penny. I do think as much as you can tie any of those things to a through line of like, why the new way of doing the work or the investments like really go back to what you're hearing from program participants, like the intended beneficiaries, right? So the folks that you're serving, that's like, I think the key that we're trying to get at with those criteria too, of like what makes a strong application. So again, you know the work best, and you know those all of the things that you could possibly apply for this year in terms of organizational capacity building. And I think it will probably be the strongest, the stronger you can make the link back to the community that you're serving. So like, you know, if it's a new programming, like have people asked for it, like what are kind of the rationale or the reasons that you want to invest in different things. And as much as you can share that, that will help the evaluation committee just really understand the impact that you're trying to have and how the intended beneficiaries are like leading or involved in that work.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts from other Partner Grants team members? Oh, I see maybe Kimberly may be typing. Although once in a while, Teams will just show you as typing if your cursor is in the box. So Kimberly, if you're not typing, I don't mean to wrongfully call you out. Okay, great.
I just wanted to say thank you. And I didn't put my name in when I was a couple minutes late, so I apologize.
No, so glad to have you here, Kimberly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and wrap up early. Of course, like we mentioned, there are also really wonderful resources on the Grant and Loan Opportunities CFB webpage. If you have any questions at all, please never hesitate to reach out at partnergrants@communityfoodbank.org. We love talking with you all. We are here to support throughout the application and full grants process. So please do check in, and thank you again all so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing your applications, and thank you for the work you do. Thanks everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye.